Hello, and welcome to this evening's UJIA Fireside Chat, Business is Blooming. I'm Harry Hatchwell, the co-chair of UJIA's SI3 Advisor Committee. Before we start, I'm going to pass you over to Emily Parter, who will provide a brief update on the situation in Israel.
Thank you, Harry. I am the UJIA Israel Director, and I thought before we launch into tonight's content, I would just share a little bit of information about what is going on in the ground in Israel today, as I'm sure it's on many of your minds. Israel is currently burning. We're burning from rocket fire from Gaza, and we're burning from the civil unrest in mixed cities across the country. Today, there was a very somber mood after a night of a real barrage of rocket fire. And for those of us living in mixed cities, whether it's Jerusalem, Lod, Akko, and others, where so many efforts have taken place over the years to develop a shared society for Jews and Arabs, which is now being eroded, hopefully just temporarily. And this crisis, it was not expected, and it's really taken us by surprise, both the intensity of the rocket fire and the rioting in the mixed cities. Restaurants, schools, cars have been burnt together with bridges of coexistence. And as a citizen of Israel, we are so grateful for the Iron Dome that has successfully intercepted 90% of the over 1,200 rockets that have been sent over to Israel in the past 2 days, starting with rocket fire in Jerusalem just over 2 days ago, which in itself was a very unusual event. Troops have been mobilized in what is now being called Operation Guardian of the Walls. Schools in the center of the country and in the south are closed and expected to be closed for the next 2 days. And we've been told tonight that everywhere across the entire country, we should be prepared for rocket fire. And just in the past hour itself, sirens going off again in the south, in Sderot, and also in Tel Aviv. We're preparing for an escalation. It's not yet clear how things are going to go. It really depends on whether Hamas is looking to continue the fighting. But what is clear is that Israel is certainly determined to send a strong message to stop this fighting. UJIA's work in Israel focuses on helping those citizens of Israel who are in need and need our help the most. And we support social impact initiatives for Jews and Arabs alike. And this is what we have done, and this is what we will continue to do going forward as this crisis passes. At the same time, we are assessing what is going on the ground and looking to see if there are increased needs, whether they're immediate over the next few days or whether there'll be needs relating to longer term recovery response. And we'll be sharing information on that over the coming days. At the same time, we're also in touch with our students that are based out here in Israel, our Master students and our gap year students. And we're also preparing materials and resources for the community in the UK who are interested in knowing what's going on in Israel and trying to understand how this crisis evolved. So for now, we're praying for an end to hostilities and for safety on all sides. And I want to thank you for joining us this evening and thank you for supporting UJIA. And I'm now happy to hand back over to Harry for this evening's event. Thank you.
Thanks, Emily, and wishing you, your family, and everyone else out there best throughout this obviously very, very difficult period. So in the spirit of togetherness, it's great to see that we have viewers from the UK, the US, Israel, and Europe. It's great. It's a truly global event and a perfect backdrop for an interview with a business leader whose vision is to build the world's leading and most loved flower brand. But before I introduce him, I want to share a little more about SI3, which stands for Social Impact Investment in Israel. Launched 4 years ago, the SI3 Fund invests in organizations that provide high-value social impact alongside a financial return as part of our broader social mission to strengthen marginalized populations within Israel. To date, SI3 has invested in 16 projects, deploying over £1.4 million in areas like urban regeneration, microfinance, education, employment, women's empowerment, and more, that are successfully tackling social issues among Israel's most vulnerable communities, including Arab, Ethiopian, Bedouin, Druze, and even children with disabilities. Our fund is built upon the concept of evergreen philanthropy, where every pound donated is carefully invested in view of recycling that capital at a later date. How we do this is a point of innovation and differentiation that makes SI3 the most active community-led impact investment portfolio in the Israel ecosystem. The investment process is underpinned by 45 advisors, a group of dynamic young UK-based professionals who give their time to appraise and diligence each investment opportunity, who support our Israel-based professional team before our experienced UK-based investment committee make the final investment decisions. In this way, SI3 provides a unique and collaborative platform for British Jewry to engage and connect with Israel. In our fifth and latest investment cycle, we made 3 new investments, one of which particularly resonated with me. This is an investment into a microfinance fund that targets Arab-owned small businesses, those terribly hit by the COVID pandemic. A disproportionately large percentage of Arab families in Israel make their living through the small business sector. Unfortunately, the different government and banking credit programs and products just simply do not meet their needs, while no social credit program targets the Arab sector. Our research suggests this credit shortage has already sent many to the grey market, a move that endangers them and their families. The microfinance fund that we've chosen to invest in will provide within its first year of operation 200 to 250 non-bank loans of up to 100,000 Israeli shekels, totaling 15 million Israeli shekels of credit. And alongside that, direct assistance will be provided to Bedouin, Druze and Arab small business owners, indirectly assisting their families and the wider Arab Israeli community. For me, this is a really great example of how SI3 and UJIA are helping drive societal change in Israel, providing a voice to those who have no voice and providing a lifeline to those who have been excluded from traditional banking structures. Please write to me in the chat if you'd like to join our SI3 community or if you'd like to hear more about the work. Now, on to the main event, and I am delighted to welcome and thank Aron Gelbard and Nick Cosgrove for joining us today. Aron is the co-founder and CEO of direct-to-consumer online flower company, Bloom & Wild, and he is a man on a mission. Since meeting Aron in 2019, I've witnessed him achieve extraordinary growth at Bloom & Wild. He has built out his now famous letterbox flower delivery model, becoming the UK's leading online flower delivery company in 2020, and following a successful Series D fundraise in January 2021 and the recent acquisition of Bloomon, a Netherlands-based competitor, he has achieved market leadership in Europe. The combined business is active across 8 countries and is expected to exceed 8 million flower deliveries in 2021, with revenue substantially north of £200 million. And despite all his success, Aron is as humble today as he was in 2019. He will be interviewed by Nick Cosgrove, previously the business presenter for BBC Radio 4's Today programme. Nick now works as a partner at Brunswick Group, where he advises blue chip clients on communications and crisis management. So over to Nick and Aron. For those watching, please do write any questions you have on the chat and we'll try to get to as many as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Harry, for your introduction. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Aron Gelbard, it's good to see you. Quite a few people have sent in questions, which I will come to, but let's get going. I want to start at the beginning. Let me ask you about your background. You weren't born in the UK. Your mum is Israeli. You moved here at the age of 5. Your dad's Australian, but you were born in France. Tell us a bit about yourself.
You've summarised most of it for me, Nick. But yeah, a bit of an unusual background. My mum left Israel in her 20s, came to London, met my dad. He's from Australia. They went to France, had me separated. My mum brought me here and, I guess brought me up by herself here as a single mum. And we navigated, trying to fit into the UK as a new country. My mum went back to Israel when I went to university, so 21 years ago now, and has lived there since then. My dad made Aliyah 2 years ago, so he's there as well now. And luckily they're okay at the moment, but obviously a worrying time for us all. Yeah,
you've checked in with them and spoken to them in the last 24 hours. I have
Yes.
parents and a sister in Israel as well, so it's a worrying time for us all.
Yes, I've spoken to them a few times, and as I'm sure we all have.
And entrepreneurship runs in the family. I think there was a chocolate business at one point.
There was. So my granddad was one of a few people who was involved in setting up Elite, which people on this call will know. And so that's the chocolate business. It doesn't have a brand name so much in the UK, but that's what it was. I never met my granddad actually, so I don't claim to learn directly from him, but we talked a lot about the business and with my mum and her brother over the years. And then my dad's an entrepreneur in the plastic recycling industry, so I've seen him go through his ups and downs of entrepreneurship, and especially the downs have impacted me as well. I think a lot of people think starting a business is sexy and exciting and lots of fun, but I saw growing up that firstly it's super hard work, and he was sort of always at it. Secondly, things can really regularly go wrong as well as going right. And my dad went through a number of those downs, and that was formative for me because I think I knew what I was letting myself in for, and it made me also want to have a bit of a safety net before starting something, go to university, work for a few years, etc.
So you went to university, you went to Oxford. And then you went to the management consultancy Bain via another consultancy, and then you made the jump to running your own business. What was that an anxious time?
Extremely. I was about to turn 30. I didn't know anything about flowers. I had a well-paid job. I was about to get engaged, and sort of hoping to start a family in a few years. And I felt like I was trading off this trajectory that was going well for a lot of uncertainty in a space that I really knew nothing about. But I also felt that if I didn't try it then I probably never would. We have two young daughters now, and I think it would be much harder now to sort of step away from security of a stable job and take a risk like that. So I felt like it was then or never really. And in hindsight, I'm glad I did it.
Yeah, I'm sure. And so this was in 2013. So where did the idea come from? Because you've just said you weren't particularly interested in flowers.
I didn't say that. I said I didn't know about flowers. I think it came from a few things. So firstly, I worked as a consultant with retail and consumer products and tech companies. So and spent quite a bit of time working on the West Coast as part of that. So I was really interested in some of the new business models emerging in the US, businesses like Birchbox, Warby Parker, that were growing up in that generation, and then also some in the UK. A friend of mine from Oxford was running Graze, the snacks through the letterbox business at the time, and I'd stayed in touch with him over the years. I was a customer of that business. I think it's really cool and innovative what they do. And that got me thinking about doing something else through the letterbox. I then had some disappointing experiences sending flowers, and so started to learn more about the category. And I guess from that, the idea was born.
So sort of moldy flowers you started off with.
Moldy flowers?
Well, the people were receiving moldy flowers when you first started.
Yes, you've done your homework. So in the early days, we didn't know a lot about flowers, and we designed what we thought was going to be, our packaging that we'd be able to go with. And I'd painstakingly spent 3 days walking around sort of Fitzrovia and Soho, knocking on doors of businesses and asking if they wanted to receive a box of our flowers for free to put in their reception or whatever. And it's remarkable how many people say no to something free. So it took me 3 days to find 20 businesses that would say yes. And then I sort of went off with my 20 boxes to the post office, literally, and posted the 20 boxes, and then called up all these businesses the next day. And all 20 of them told me that the flowers had this sort of like brown, rusty spotting on them. And they looked moldy. And I, I was obviously very apologetic, and then started
from that.
Well, none of them are our customers today, so I'm not sure we did, but luckily it was 20 businesses, not 20,000 businesses. And it turned out that the amaryllis that we sent out, I remember them well, had developed a disease called botrytis, which is what happens to certain varieties of flower when they don't have sufficient ventilation over an extended time period. They sort of get sweaty, basically. And this was just something that we hadn't factored in. And actually, it was a really costly mistake because we'd started the business with our own savings, and we'd had to put a significant proportion of it into buying these boxes that we thought were going to be our final packaging, and they ended up completely not fit for purpose. So that was, I guess, a classic example of trying to run before we could walk, and one that we tried not to repeat.
Nonetheless, it became a huge success very quickly. At what point did you realize you were going to make it?
Our first Mother's Day, which was nearly a year after we launched, I remember it well because we didn't really have any technology for processing our orders. So I used to have to process them and make the address labels for each customer one at a time. And we're getting about 100 orders every week, and it would take me about an hour and a half to do it. So I got quite quick at doing it in sort of mail merge, believe it or not. And then I came to do that week's order, not really realizing what a big thing Mother's Day was. And there are 1,000 orders to do.
Wow.
And I felt the fact that 1,000 people, and we hadn't raised any, meaningful funding yet. We'd raised a small round of seed funding, didn't have a marketing budget. And I felt that the fact that 1,000 people were trusting our business, and you could only get the flowers delivered on a Thursday or a Tuesday at that point. So it's either 3 days before Mother's Day or 2 days after Mother's Day. Even 2 days after was relatively popular.
Really?
And still is now, actually. In more mature times, people miss our cutoff, but the couple of days after, or we sell out of a particular bouquet, which is the one that they want, so they order for after Mother's Day, and they send a happy belated Mother's Day card. So it hasn't stopped, but that was when I thought that we were onto something with the product.
And you mentioned seed funding. You actually ploughed your own savings in at first.
Certainly did. Still not got them back. I'm hopeful the company will return them to me at some point. But I guess I was fortunate that I had a decently paid job, and so I was able to save a bit of money to start something. But it was important for me to do it by myself. I didn't want to ask my family to support me and feel like they needed to. And then, if it didn't go well, it's always awkward and stuff. So it was important to me that this would be my own thing, and I'd save money to start it. And then I think when you're spending your own money, you're circumspect about doing so, albeit ordering the boxes without the ventilation. And then when we had sufficient traction, I felt it was the right thing to do was to try and raise money from angel investors, because then you get genuine feedback as well, and you don't feel like somebody's writing you a check to do you a favor. It's a commercial decision that they're making, and it's a validation that what you're doing hopefully has some legs.
And what about the name? How did you come up with it?
My co-founder Ben's, at the time girlfriend, now wife, came up with it. We went through various other names. I initially wanted to be called... I wanted to be called Bloombox, which was a bit obvious. There's actually now a company called Bloombox Club. Bloombox was taken, which does plants, so they went for an incarnation of that. Then we thought maybe Bloom Fox as a play on Bloom Box, which would be arriving really speedily, but we didn't go with that. And then Elizabeth, Ben's now wife, came up with Bloom and Wild, and we liked it. It sort of felt quite British, almost like a name that's clearly floral. Sounds maybe like not a sort of whizzy tech startup, which was important for us in terms of positioning, because while that's a type of company we're building internally, we don't want to sort of be unapproachable to our customers or to our recipients. And we felt Bloom and Wild sounded good for that, and we stuck with it.
And how important was word of mouth to get started and to get people to find you?
It was the entirety of what we did. Ben and I used to get an email from our system every time somebody placed an order, and we had this depressing. We sublet a third of a 600 square foot office from another startup on an industrial estate in Wandsworth, and we had our corner of it, and we looked over every time somebody placed an order and said, how do you know that person? And I remember the day, it was about a month after we'd started, when somebody placed an order, and it turned out that neither of us knew them, and we sort of frantically went on to LinkedIn and Twitter and tried to work out who this person was and whether there was a second-degree connection, and it turned out it was a colleague of one of my friends. So we still hadn't got to escape velocity. But that was everything to begin with. And then actually, this sounds like a really well-planned sort of growth hack, but it genuinely wasn't. We thought we needed to get out there into the public and tell people about the business. We didn't have a marketing budget. So we bought a few hundred roses inexpensively from a trader at the New Covent Garden Flower Market, and we thought, where will people who are going to have the budget to buy flowers online be? And we decided that a great place would be in front of Whole Foods in High Street, Ken, because I think it was the only Whole Foods in London at the time, and it was just a relatively premium store. So we stood in front of the Whole Foods with our box of roses and offered people flowers. And after about 3 minutes, the manager came out and told us that he was going to call the police if we didn't move, because we were sort of leveraging the real estate of his store for our commercial gain, or some threatening language like that. And we didn't really want to sort of. Mainly the problem was, again, it'd be quite difficult to physically move all of these flowers before we'd given them away. So we really didn't want to get moved along. So we sort of shuffled the box of flowers down like about a block along High Street, Ken, and stood there, and completely not realizing that we'd ended up in front of the office of the Daily Mail. Cool. I handed a lady, I think it's the second or third lady that came out of the tube station, a flower. She started asking me who I was, and it turned out that she was a journalist for the Daily Mail. And then, like, the next day, we're in the newspaper, and people started to find out about it. But that was certainly not premeditated. It was just a bit of good luck.
Effective PR. And tell me, are letterboxes all the same size?
I wish they were. One of the other things I spent my early days doing, between going to post offices and trying to persuade businesses to get free flowers and then groveling to them when they were moldy, was measuring letterboxes. So I've personally measured many thousands of letterboxes. And
are they or aren't they the same size?
No, they're not the same size at all. And which is why it was important to measure so many, because we built a sort of, it's a bit geeky, distribution curve of widths, lengths, percentage that have got a cage behind them, which means that you can't post the flowers through them. I've been caught by several people, kneeling on their doorstep with a ruler and a notebook, which is a really awkward conversation to have. Less awkward if there are a few other measurements and it doesn't look like you're planning a burglary. I guess maybe I don't look like the kind of guy that's planning a burglary, but you never know. So they're not the same size at all. And actually, we had to make a trade-off between optimizing our box to fit through as many letterboxes as possible, but then not making it so small that it couldn't fit very many flowers or a wide variety of flowers, and we get to sort of diminishing returns on the percentage of letterboxes that it would work with.
And it's not just letterboxes you're dependent on, you're also dependent on Royal Mail, because I think they are the people that do your delivery. Is it a frustration to be so dependent on another company that you can't really control?
At the beginning, it was. I think, we now actually work with a few other carriers in the UK, and then some smaller scale carriers as well, cycle couriers in London, to make all of our deliveries zero carbon. And then as we've expanded internationally, delivery companies in other countries. And Royal Mail are an outstanding delivery partner, and they've become a better and better delivery partner as we've got bigger. We learned that we were their second biggest parcel customer after Amazon, which is crazy.
Wow.
And so I guess we get really good service from them. But this has meant things like trialing their Sunday delivery service, which they're rolling out now in some areas, which we're a trialist for, which is a brilliant thing to be able to offer our customers so that we don't have to have a surcharge for Sunday delivery. We were the first trialists for their 11 p.m. collection offering, which they offer to some larger businesses, which means that we can carry on taking orders from customers until 10 p.m. for delivery almost nationwide the next day, and we see the same success rate. So actually, I think they've become a really good partner, and I think we've also been an exciting business for them, and the business has had good buzz about it. I think postmen sort of enjoy the notion of our product. We've made lots of videos for their intranet and done events for their workforce, online flower arranging classes, stuff like that. And it's turned into a really nice partnership.
And what are the most sort of popular flowers at the moment? I see you've got some flowers behind you. Is that one of your best sellers?
This is our flower team's pick. So we, which rotates weekly, which we have as our entry-level subscription offering. So it's by definition a bestseller. Our most popular flowers, especially at this time of year, are peonies. So we've just launched our peony collection. Peonies are only available in May and June. They have a short 7-week season, and they're the world's most Instagrammed flower. And they're also on, the more expensive end of the spectrum because they're relatively sort of hard to come by. So we see that they tend to be particularly popular in more affluent areas, such as Northwest London, for example.
I was going to ask you, actually, I mean, how flower tastes change. I mean, I know you're in 8 countries, but I'd be interested to know for this audience, what's the difference between flower taste in North London versus, say, South Manchester?
People spend a bit more money in, Northwest London and sort of wealthier parts of London and the home counties. So we see average order value is about 8 to 10% higher in London and the home counties, especially to the west of London, compared to other parts of the UK, which I guess is consistent with demographic trends in those areas. As a result, we sell more peonies. We sell a higher percentage of our hand-tied bouquets. We sell fewer Christmas trees than in other parts of than in everywhere else. Unsurprisingly, we see. Actually, interestingly, also we see a spike, which you'd expect in deliveries around Jewish holidays, like Rosh Hashanah, for example, or Pesach, when it's not a national spike, but we get local spikes. I mentioned that we do our own deliveries in London, and so we plan in additional capacity with cycle couriers so that we can continue to meet that extra delivery demand over Jewish holidays with while sticking to our eco delivery goals.
Very good. I just want to go back to something you've just said, because I think people will find it hard to envisage a Christmas tree through the letterbox. How does that work? Yeah,
so it might sound like an odd thing for a company set up by somebody Jewish to be doing, but they're a complete bestseller and people love them. So I had actually a couple of years into the business, the idea of doing plants through the letterbox as well. So the way we do them is they come in a soft pot made typically of canvas or rope or a material like that. The plant itself has a small root ball attached to it, and then we provide additional soil and moss. So it's somewhat of a DIY concept like the letterbox flowers, where you fill your pot with your soil, put the plant in, put the moss on, and we do this for a number of plants over the course of the year, like orchid plants, for example. We do it in the same way, azaleas, but they're we figured out that the same thing could work for mini Christmas trees, so which are 45 centimeters high. And they're replantable, which has been really popular. Again, we try to be sort of eco-friendly as a business, so people replant them and then they'll use them again the next year. We get emails from our customers sort of comparing the growth of their Bloom and Wild Christmas tree to their children over a few year period. And they've been a huge hit. Obviously, now many other companies do them in the same way as letterbox flowers, but they're an innovation we're proud of.
And so Christmas is obviously a big time for you, but is that Mother's Day? Is that the busiest week of the year?
Yeah, Mother's Day by far the busiest, then Christmas, then Valentine's Day. 75% of our customers are female, both in the UK and in all other countries. So we're, and 90% of our orders are gifts. So we're mainly a female to female gifting business. And as a result of that, Valentine's Day has ended up being a little smaller because it tends to be more of a occasion where men are the buyers, although we try to challenge that. We actually did a No Red Roses campaign for Valentine's Day this year to try and build some buzz around challenging Valentine's Day stereotypes. Christmas is a bit different because it's really it's not like, people aren't so much buying flowers as like a Christmas present, to like have under the tree or, open on Christmas Day. So it tends to be more of a month-long period, starting with the Christmas trees, especially over Black Friday, Cyber Monday weekend. And then people also buy wreaths and other forms of home decoration. And there's a higher rate of self-purchase as people think about decorating their homes, as they entertain family and things like that.
And you said that, just a question about the demographic, you mentioned that most of your customers are female. What sort of age would they be?
Yeah, so the sweet spot is 25 to 45. The real bullseye is therefore in their early 30s. So we have a lot of young professionals or people, women in particular, just starting families. By far the most common recipient group is daughters gifting to mothers. And actually, we've therefore built a strong base of customers as well, who are women typically in their late 50s to mid 60s, who have typically discovered Bloom and Wild not via online advertising on Instagram or something like that, but by having been a recipient and thought that the product was novel and innovative. They've enjoyed arranging the flowers. We get great feedback about that process, and then they go on to become customers in their own right. And we now see that about half our customers have discovered us by either having received the product or by word of mouth, and that's been really important for us as we've grown the business.
And you're not the only ones doing this. I mean, there's competition in the form of Freddy's Flowers and Moonpig. And when I was growing up, it was Interflora. You don't hear so much about Interflora anymore. What do you make of the opposition?
Yeah, well, we still hear about Interflora a lot in our office. So Interflora, we've recently overtaken them, but Interflora has been the market leader in online flowers since the invention of the internet in the UK. So they have an extremely well-known brand name. When I was a child, I thought Interflora was kind of an official organization like the NHS, and just like where you got flowers from. And I think for a lot of people, that's the perception of Interflora, and that's in a way a challenge to compete against. But I think a lot of people know Interflora, but very few people feel passionately that they must always order from Interflora in the way that people feel passionate about buying an iPhone or something like that. And you mentioned Freddy's Flowers, which is a business that we respect and admire, that started 2-3 years after us. We don't really compete with them directly because it's a subscription-focused business. It therefore skews heavily towards self-purchase. Once you have a subscription, you can then order a one-off box for somebody else, but you can't just send somebody a one-off box of Freddy's Flowers as a gift. I mean, you can if you cancel after your first delivery, but it's not really how the business is designed. And so we find that it tends to meet a different use case. And actually, we see that there's quite a bit of overlap between our customer base and theirs, and people might have had, especially during lockdown or things like that, a Freddy's Flowers subscription, and then will use us for their gifting purposes. Moonpig is another business that we really respect. It's also recently gone public, which is interesting as we think about how our own business might develop. It's primarily a card business, but they've developed a business selling flowers either with cards or standalone. We tried to have I guess a slightly more aspirational brand positioning than Moonpig, and we've ended up therefore appealing to a slightly different demographic to them that's more focused on, London, home counties, and other, affluent towns like, Bristol, Edinburgh, Oxford, places like that as our heartlands.
And you mentioned the pandemic. I just wonder, just from my own sort of talking to friends, I know a lot of people, have had sort of Freddie Flowers subscriptions just in the last year as a sort of lockdown treat. How much of a game changer has the pandemic been for you?
Yeah, so it's been, it's been a piece of incredibly good fortune for us, Freddies, and and everybody in our industry, in the worst possible of ways. And we feel like we've been very fortunate to be dealt a good hand. I think the first thing that I'd say is we realized what was happening fast and took our responsibilities very seriously. First, to make sure that we could continue doing business in a COVID safe way, especially as we saw demand really try to start to spike. Secondly, make sure that we were sort of redistributing some of that good fortune. So we extended our staff discount, which means that we give our staff can buy flowers at cost to the NHS and all frontline workers. We supported the National Emergencies Trust Coronavirus Appeal, and we now partner with the Carers Trust. And I think sort of thinking about it sort of brought into focus some of what we're really about as a business. I think from a more commercial perspective, there was a massive acceleration in demand. Some of that was self-purchase and people wanting to brighten up their homes, which they were spending more time in. Actually, for our business, which is a gifting-focused business, the main thing was what we call a substitute for a hug, and people just not being able to see their loved ones. Especially, I mentioned, mums who are like maybe in their 60s, even grannies who are in their 80s or 90s tend to be the most common recipient groups. And so those were groups that people felt particularly worried about sort of putting at risk. So being able to show care and thought, and actually for delivery to occur in a contactless way, which again, letterbox sort of is well suited to, was landed really well. What ended up happening is that demand grew more quickly than we were able to grow our supply base, because you can't just magic up twice or three times as many flowers from one week to another. Even if you can find the farms, you need to plan it out and book it in and have the right varieties and arrange transport and people to pack them in a COVID safe environment and things like that. So we ended up scaling back a lot of our paid marketing and promotion during lockdown, especially that first lockdown last spring. And as a result of that, we not only acquired a large number of customers, but also a really good quality of customer, because we weren't attracting customers who were just trying it to get the discount on the first order that we and most of our industry peers offer. And so that stood us in good stead. And then we were super focused on maintaining quality. We obsessive a net promoter score, which is a measure of customer advocacy and feedback, as our North Star metric for our business. And we made absolutely sure that was as high as ever during the pandemic. And as a result, I think a lot more people discovered Bloom & Wild for the first time, but and really came to trust us and have stuck with us even as social restrictions eased last summer and as they're easing again now.
And how long does it take from, say, the flowers being cut in the field in Africa, or I don't know where? I mean, do you get them from Israel, to dropping onto a customer's letterbox?
Yeah, so we do get some flowers from Israel. It's a few % of our ordering. We have quite a diverse set of countries from which we source flowers. It depends primarily on quality of flowers and being able to operate a short supply chain. Different countries, because of altitude, rainfall, soil type, all sorts of things like that, grow different sorts of flowers. We source flowers in England where we can as well, which is important to customers from a sort of eco perspective in particular. So some of our peonies and gladioli, for example, are grown in England. We source about 40% of our flowers from Kenya. So it's our single largest source market. When we started the business, we were concerned about the eco impact of doing this. What we've since learned is that the carbon footprint of growing flowers in a natural climate, by which I mean, on or around the equator, right altitude, temperature and rainfall, has a sixth of the carbon impact of growing them in a heated greenhouse somewhere in Northern Europe. And so especially in winter, where many of the Christmas, Valentine's Day and Mother's Day all occur, sourcing from Kenya makes complete sense. I personally and a number of other people on my team have spent quite a bit of time in Kenya getting really comfortable with both the eco credentials and the broader CSR questions around growing there. We've also, sorry, I've not answered your question about duration. We can get it from the flowers from Kenya to your kitchen table in as little as 3 days. Sometimes it takes a day or two longer, but the quick path is the flowers cut in Naivasha, which is a couple of hours west of Nairobi, on a Monday morning, along with some other flowers. We actually do some of the bunching, so assembling the flowers into bouquets, quality control, stripping leaves, trimming in Naivasha, which is really good for helping keep our prices low, but is also good for environmental impact, because we're not shipping flowers to the UK and then rejecting them for quality. And then it would get on a plane from Nairobi on Monday night. It would land typically at Doncaster, which is a cargo-only airport, on Tuesday morning. We pack our flowers in the UK in Lincolnshire, soon adding a second, which is at a partner's warehouse. We're adding our own second one in Nuneaton, which is going to open in July as well. And so they'd be conditioned on the Tuesday afternoon. They'd be packed on the Wednesday morning, handed over to the Royal Mail, typically on Wednesday, and then arrive on Thursday nationwide. Sometimes we add a day or two into that process, because often what we call the green banana problem, where the flowers can be too in bud if we get them to customers that quickly, and then by the time they've bloomed, some of the other flowers have started to die. So we try to manage that.
We've only got a couple of minutes left, so I want to take some questions from viewers. One here is saying, what advice would you give to someone with a nugget of an idea?
Really go for it. I think, in the UK, we can be quite risk averse as a country. And I think, it's rare that I come across people who've tried and not succeeded at doing something. And I meet a lot of entrepreneurs and wish they'd never tried. But I think you meet a lot of people who don't ever try something like this and come to regret it. Obviously, that comes from a position of privilege, and sometimes people can't afford to risking leaving their day job behind, and it's too much work to do it on evenings and weekends, and they've got family and other commitments. So I say that with utmost respect for people's circumstances, but I think it really is worth trying. The other piece of advice I'd say is, a lot of people ask me, I've just started a company, how can I grow it more quickly? And actually, often if you're not growing it very quickly, it's because some aspect of the proposition isn't very good. And if you're sort of forcing people to buy something but they don't really like it, then you're pushing a rock up a hill. Whereas if you like it and people are recommending it and going on to receiving and going on to try it, then you get that natural growth.
And what about good advice? I think someone else is asking, is Brexit a big challenge for you?
It's turned out to be less of a challenge than we thought it might be. When it was coming up, we, especially I guess with the uncertainty of not knowing whether there was going to be a deal or not, like lorries queuing up in Kent, things like that. We are reliant partly on that channel crossing, and so that was a concern. I think, in a way, because we're already sourcing from outside the EU with Kenyan sourcing, Israeli sourcing, among other sourcing, we were set up for it already, and so we've adapted that process for other sourcing. We have had to pause doing business in Ireland altogether because we can't ship from the UK to Ireland. We're working on reintroducing that, so that's probably been the biggest negative that's stuck. Excuse me.
And final question, let's not talk about work. I know you go to Wimbledon Reform, Shul, how do you relax?
Maybe it's not the right thing to say, but not by going to Shul. I find it's, I need to make sure I'm on the right page and things like that. So I've got 2 young daughters and really try to spend my spare time with them, make up stories for them. I really enjoy doing. My wife tends to read our older daughter a story, and then I go in after that and just make one up. We have a series about an elephant that we've been building for the last 6 months, and I find that really enjoyable.
Maybe that's your next business idea.
Maybe. I briefly worked on a terrible idea. This is a fun one to end with, which was going to be called Boris Brolly's, which is going to be like a bike rental for umbrellas, which I think would have been a complete nightmare. So hopefully, if I do another business, it'll be a bit of a better idea than that.
Well, you've done pretty well so far. We've run out of time, sadly. Aron Gelbard, inspirational to hear from you. I wish you much continued success, and thank you for giving up your time tonight for UJIA.
Thank you for having me.